Um, Staying in Serie A, though, I've actually got quite an interesting move, one that perhaps we don't see too often. Sam, you said that you'd watched a little bit of this man in the run up to this podcast. And that is because it is Dennis Mann, who is the latest addition to Parma, who are struggling in Serie A this season, it has to be said. But they've spent around £12 million on Dennis Mann from FCSB, which, besides getting into the politics of it, used to be Steaua Bucuresti before the government before the army staged a coup and changed the name, and there was it got very messy, basically. But it's one of my favourites from the January transfer window, because Dennis Mann has been the man of the Romanian top flight for the past 18 months, I'd say. And starting this season, he got 14 goals and 5 assists in 18 appearances for FCSB. And yeah, they were just a very, very exciting team, despite not being sort of the best. They were just very exciting, and it was only a matter of time before he moved. And Serie A does continue to be a good landing point for Eastern European talents. So yeah, I'm happy to see him in Serie A, because there's the chance that I'll probably stumble across him more often when I'm flicking through channels. But yeah, I mean, from what you saw, Sam, what was the standout for you with the man Dennis Mann?
Well, it's actually someone I've kept an eye on, and it's been on my radar for a good 18 months, maybe even up to 2 years, because one of the Ranks FC listeners is a Romanian guy who lives in Chicago. And when we went out to the US for 2 weeks of work, we met up with a couple of the podcast listeners in Chicago, and this Romanian guy turned up and said hello, and has been DMing me about Dennis Mann literally weekly ever since. Whether it's Dennis Mann starts today, he's on the team sheet and sent me the team sheet, or Dennis Mann scored again today, or Dennis Mann's just back 2 assists, or Dennis Mann's playing for the Romania under-21s. It's been relentless, and I'm not saying it's annoying. It's great. Like, I've been thoroughly aware of Dennis Mann thanks to thanks to one of our listeners, and I've been sort of sporadically checking in and out. And when his transfer went through to Parma this winter, definitely caught my eye for obvious reasons. And he's an interesting one. I don't know what the ceiling is, because he's not that fast, and he's a winger. But then again, like he gives me a very kind of Andriy Yarmolenko vibe, in that he has a very upright running style. He's quite tall for a winger, has a beautiful shooting technique. It's so sweet, and he's left-footed, so cutting in off that right flank and firing low and firing high with the left foot is from range, from 18 yards, from 10 yards, whatever it is he's pretty automatic. It's really interesting. It's a really reliable technique. He does give me a kind of Yarmolenko vibe. So from the one hand, I look at it and go, you lack the pace to be an elite wide forward, but that doesn't preclude you from having a Yarmolenko-like career, which, lands you in the Champions League more often than not, gets you a move to somewhere like Borussia Dortmund. We don't talk about the West Ham thing, but he was very good in Ukraine for Dynamo Kiev. And if Dennis Mann can become that kind of player, then that's a really, really successful career. And there is a part of me that also thinks he might be convertible to a striker.
I think that too. That was what I was going to sort of butt in with. But yeah, there's something about, I think it's the physicality, the element of him. It's not that he's a target man. It's not that he's this really, a big handful. It's just that his finishing instinct, I think, is really, really on point.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, okay, he's not big and burly like Yarmolenko, and Yarmolenko used to play up front himself as well for Dynamo Kiev on occasion. So there is another comparison there. But he's a bit more slinky. He's a bit more subtle. The technique is probably stronger. There's less strength. Again, he's got very good close control and technique. And I guess if you mashed Skamaka with Yarmolenko, you might get something approaching what I think Dennis Mann could be in 2 years.
If you took out Skamaka's shin bones, so that he was about 6 inches smaller.
Yes, but Dennis Mann's 6 foot odd, isn't he? 6'1" maybe. He's in that area, so we don't have to reduce his height completely.
But yeah, you're preaching to the choir here if you're mentioning Gianluca Scamacca on the Scouted Football podcast. Woo, he is, he's going to be a player certainly. But yeah, Dennis Mann, it's also an interesting move because Parma also have Valentin Mihaila, who's also Romanian at Parma as well, and they've also signed Joshua Zirkzee on loan from Bayern Munich. So I think the second half of the season, even if results don't pick up for them, I think they'll be interesting certainly from an under 23 perspective, because you don't sign that many young players if you don't intend on playing them to get you out of your current situation. And just on Romanian football, while we're there, as much as it pains me to say it, I do think that Dennis Mann has a higher ceiling than my Scouted Football Volume 8 baby, which was Florinel Coman, who he has been termed the Romanian Mbappe before. Now,
Is that by
I
you?
no, it's not. Funnily enough, it isn't by me. I would never, ever, ever make such a comparison. Although I may have made similar ones about different players that I won't discuss. But with Florinel Coman, he's another one who's a wide player who also can really play as a centre forward. And he's just very fun. But when I was watching FCSB, bloody hell, that's a mouthful, games, it was always Man who would be the more reliable. I just always got that sense that if you wanted somebody to put a chance away or to make the right decision, to not over dribble, it was going to be Dennis Mann. So it's probably the right move. If they've been watching plenty of FCSB, they've gone for Mann instead of Coman, which I now realise are very similar names.